fantasy league. It's been a long, long time. And for that, I apologize. But I've got a few very important things to discuss leading up to the playoffs and a few questions that I need your guys' input on for our season next year. Because I've started thinking about that a little bit as we're winding down here. So, if you are one of the 6 teams that are either in the playoffs or in playoff contention, you know that it's a little bit crazy right now. Basically, 4 of us are still in limbo, depending on this week. If you get to 13 wins, you're good. So Andrew and Tyler have clinched playoff spots. Andrew has clinched first place. Congratulations for that number 1 playoff seed, Andrew. If Tyler loses and Simon wins, they will. I'm not sure what their head-to-head records are against each other, but I know Simon has more points. So I would imagine that depending on the head-to-head record, Simon might be in second, Tyler in third. But so basically, if Simon loses and Brian wins, and either me or Katie is going to win because we're playing each other, that means there'll be 3 teams at 12 and 10. And Brian asked last week about the tiebreakers, and in case you missed that, I did put the answer on the Smack board, and it's in the league settings as well, that are tiebreakers for the playoffs. The first thing is head-to-head record. So you'd match up on, are you 2-0, 2-1, 1-1, etc. And if you're 1-1 against each other, if your head-to-head is like negligible, then it pushes to the total amount of points that you have scored this season. So the advantage there is, let me see what you got going on here. Simon has the most points out of the whole league. And then Andrew's second, but he's clinched already. Katie is third, Brian is fourth, and I'm fifth. So, and Tyler is sixth, right behind me. So that's what we got going on as far as the playoffs go. One rule thing for the playoffs. So remember, this is the last week of our regular season, our 22nd matchup. And every team is free to make moves as usual this week, just as long as when you pick up a player, you hang on to him for a week as per our house rule there. Then once we roll over into the playoffs, the 6 teams that do not make the playoffs, they roster freeze. So if you don't make the playoffs, then don't make any moves for the rest of the year. The consolation playoff bracket does not factor in to your overall standing at the end of the year, and it will not affect your draft position. So, for example, if you come in 7th place, the consolation brackets will not affect your 7th draft position next year. You'll draft 7th. If you come in 5th and you lose the 2 consolation games you play, it's not going to bump you down to like 7th or 8th. You're going to stay in your 5th draft position for next year. So, since those games don't matter for the outcome of the season, and just to make it more fair for the playoff teams, if you're not in the playoffs, roster freeze. If you are in the playoffs, you can make moves just as usual. Just make sure if you add a player, you hang on to him for a week or longer. Speaking of that rule, that's going to lead me into talking about some things for next year. So one of the things that I am toying with for next year is getting rid of the hanging on to a player for a week rule and doing an acquisition limit instead. And my thinking behind this is every year that we've done the league, I get more and more texts and questions from people basically asking if they can bend or break the hang on to a player for a week rule for various factors. And I think that most people follow the rule most of the time and it works well, but I'm just getting enough texts about it to where I am thinking of getting rid of it. Usually, let me take a look here. So usually the average amount of acquisitions that we've made so far this year and last year is usually somewhere around 40. Usually the highest is around 70, sometimes a little higher, and the lowest is usually around 20. So I'm thinking instead of doing this, you got to hang on to a player for a week thing, you get 40 acquisitions for the entire season, and that's it. Or possibly even a little less than that. I might do 35. But anyways, I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on that because I'm not 100% sure if I want to do that or not. So if you would send me feedback on that either via text or email or Smackboard or League message board, that would be great because I really would like to hear what you guys think about that. Yeah, because my mind is not made up, although I will say I'm probably leaning towards doing an acquisition limit next year. Another reason I'm kind of leaning towards doing an acquisition limit next year, and maybe even a slightly lower one, is I'd love to see more trades in this league. I think that'd be fun. And if we do an acquisition limit, but do no trade limit, then you could trade as much as you wanted, but you can only pick up a certain number of guys off the waiver wire. So I think that might add an interesting dynamic to the league. But anyways, yeah, let me know what you think about that, how you feel about that. One other thing I'm thinking about for next year. So some of you remember if you were in the league the very first year, we only had 8 teams. And we had 2-week-long playoff matches. So the regular season, they were all 1-week matchups. And then once we got to the playoffs, those 2 playoff matchups each lasted 2 weeks. And I kind of miss that. We haven't done that since the very first year, and I kind of like that because I sort of try and make this league as much like Major League Baseball as possible. And so I think it would be kind of cool if the playoff series got longer, just like they do in the actual majors. But to do that, we would have to shorten the regular season a little bit. So right now we play a 22-game regular season schedule. And that 22-game schedule came from when we expanded the league from 8 teams to 12 teams. I thought it would be easy enough if we all played each other twice, which made for a 22-week season, and then there was only enough time left over for 1-week playoff matchups. But for the past 2 years, we've only had 10 teams in the league, and they seem to be a pretty solid 10 teams, and hopefully you guys have as much fun with it as I do, and you'd like to stick around. But one of the things I'm toying with for next year is instead of doing 22 regular season matchups, doing 18. So we each play each other twice. And then that would leave space for 2-week-long playoff matchups at the end of the year. So it would shorten the regular season by 4 weeks, but it would only shorten the overall season, including the playoffs, by 2 weeks. I know some of the cons to that would be, or one of the cons to that would be, if you don't make the playoffs, then you have a whole month at the end worth of games that don't necessarily matter to your fate. But it seems like in this league, even in the consolation brackets, people pretty much pay attention and like to win because we don't like to lose. So I'm not sure how much of an effect that would be. But that's another thing. Please let me know your thoughts on that. If you'd be, what you think about switching from a 22-game season to an 18-game season. And one of the things that has kind of got me on that, as well as missing the 2-week playoffs, is we got so many teams so close to making the playoffs this year, and some of them have played each other 3 times, and some of them have played each other only twice. And it kind of makes a big difference with the way that our tiebreaker is set up, because if teams go 1-1 against each other, obviously it's a very different situation than if they go 2-1, or they play 3 matchups or whatever. So yeah, let me know what you think about that. Possibly shortening the regular season from 22 to 18 and switching to 2-week-long playoff matches. And there was only one more thing I was thinking about for next year. So I really like that our league is not a money league. I think that it's fun and competitive, and we do still have the main prize. In case you've forgotten what our trophy looks like, we got this beautiful custom-made, custom-designed trophy that we got going on here that is only in my house because Katie won last year. And it says first place Backpack O'Crackle Fantasy Baseball League down there. But I was kind of thinking it might be fun to do some additional, like, in-season prizes next year. You just kind of pick out random weeks and be like, hey, week 10, if you have the player who hits the most home runs in the league, you win so-and-so prize. Or if, different stuff like that. Just kind of like little mini challenges throughout the season. And prizes would be just like, fun stuff like maybe candy or an MLB shop gift card or something else, just kind of, fun and goofy. But to do that, I would probably need to get probably $10 from everybody at the beginning of the season just to have some money to buy those prizes. So yeah, that's one more thing to think about. Again, I don't want to make this like a prize money league or a league where you have to pay to make moves, because I really just don't want to get into all that. But I thought it might be kind of fun if we all pitch in $10 at the beginning of the year, and then I can pool that money together to buy some prizes, gift cards, candy, various things, and set up little challenges throughout the year. And if you win those challenges, you get to win the mini prize. Yeah. So I think that's all. So to recap, sorry for the very long video. I really, really wanted to keep it under 10 minutes, and I see I'm at 12 here. But to recap, for this season, this is our last week of the regular season. Please make moves as much as you like, as long as you hang on to a player for a week. If you do not make the playoffs, freeze your roster. Please do not make moves if you don't make the playoffs after this week. If you don't make the playoffs, the constellation games won't affect your draft position next year. And then a couple things I'd really like to get your feedback on for next year are switching from the hanging on to a player for a week rule to an acquisition limit, what you think about that. Going from a 22-week season to an 18-week season with 2-week playoff matchups, and possibly pitching in $10 at the beginning of the year to go toward prizes that we can win with little mini challenges throughout the year. So yeah, let me know what you think about that stuff. Again, sorry for the long video. I know I can get a little rambly, but it's been a long time. There's nothing funny in this one, but maybe this Healand coup will make you smile.